Hello, everyone. This is Afton. I want to present to you my research that I did this semester for a class. My project is called the Sport Education Model and the Affective Domain. So my project was done on sport education model and the affective domain. The introduction, what exactly is sport education model? If you're not a physical education teacher, you probably do not know what the sport education model is. The goal of the sport education model is to create competent, literate, and enthusiastic individuals within the physical education classroom. There are 6 key features to the sport education model. The first one being seasons. Usually when you teach a physical education unit, you do 1 week of skills, this teacher guided, and then you do 1 week of gameplay, and then maybe 1 week of tournament play if you want to really lengthen it out. But in the sport education model, seasons are longer. The teacher introduces the skills of whatever sport it is, and then the students come up with different activities that they do and strategies that they do for the game or the unit. The second key feature is team affiliation. Sometimes in PE, when we have units, we tend to choose teams daily, meaning that students don't stay with the same team throughout the unit. In the sport education model, students do stay with the same team throughout the unit, which is usually 6 weeks or longer.
Ms. Bragg, if you're in the building, can you please come to the conference room?
The third key component to the sport education model is formal competition. So they have a time after they've worked out their strategies as a team and worked on their skills as a team. They do formal competition, which could be a round robin tournament. Culminating events is maybe the tournament at the end after the round robin. The fifth key component is record keeping. This allows students to learn how to keep statistics, how to keep score, important things that will allow children to be more interested in the sport itself. And then the sixth one is festivity. Like for a championship game at the end, the teacher makes it a really big deal, like tailgating is like in college football and other sports. You have a really big festivity at the end for the championship game. The domains in education are the psychomotor, which is typically what physical educators focus on. Cognitive kind of falls by the wayside a little in physical education, but we still focus on it. And then the affective domain is one that a lot of teachers tend to forget. And that's why I wanted to focus on that for this project, because a lot of teachers tend to forget the affective domain. And in education, we are supposed to be teaching to the whole child. So as far as the affective domain, it's the attitudes, values, and beliefs that children have towards physical education is what I wanted to focus on. The purpose of the study is to examine whether implementing the sport education model improves students' attitudes, values, and beliefs about physical education, which aligns with the affective domain in education. Some of the research I did states that the sport education model can be adapted to reach different audiences and apply to different learning outcomes. That's why I chose it. The research that I did said that it can be adapted. It can be adapted for any student population, really. It can be adapted to multiple intelligence. So the 8 different multiple intelligence that we have gone over, it can be adapted to be interesting to each multiple intelligent. It can also be adapted to reach students with disabilities. It doesn't always just have to be, your more athletic student population. It can be, student with disabilities. Different people can have different key roles in the sport education model. And then the sport education model can also be intertwined with a tactical game approach, which allows students to come up with strategies to actually, come up with to play the game or play the unit or play the sport, whatever you are teaching. The sport education model improves student motivation in physical education. There have been studies done that in high school, in a study that consisted of high school students, they found that students' motivation increased more when participating in a sport education model rather than a multi-activity model. And a multi-activity model just means maybe there's basketball, volleyball, and badminton going on, and then the students get to choose which activity they'd like to participate in that day. There's also an increase in activity throughout the implementation of the sport education model is attributed to the amount of fun and enjoyment the students experience throughout the season. So they're having more fun and enjoyment with the sport education model. And another study found that the students were more intrinsically motivated throughout the season and self-determined to succeed when the sport education model was implemented. A lot of times in education, students are extrinsically motivated, but this study found that as the unit went on, the students became more intrinsically motivated throughout the season. The sport education model helps create pedagogical concepts for the physical education teacher. What I found out that is if you implement the sport education model, a lot of things fall by the wayside that normal physical education teachers might have problem with, like student behavior, student expectations, students not knowing what's expected of them. But if you implemented the sport education model, each person on the team has a role and they are responsible to make sure that they not only do their role, but that their teammates do the role that they're assigned as well. The sport education model is an effective alternative to traditional physical education programs that utilize the multi-activity approach. Teachers experience benefits such as decreased direct instruction and increased opportunities to assess students. So since the sport education model is student-centered, it allows us more time to assess students, maybe for the cognitive domain or even the psychomotor domain. The organization and instruction at the beginning of the year will alleviate problems throughout the year. So if you start the year off with the sport education model, it will allow your life to be a lot easier throughout the year because the students already know the expectations through the sport education model. As far as the affective domain, I did not find any research, which is why I want to do as a research gap in the sport education model and how it applies to the affective domain. So I did my research on why the affective domain is so important in PE, and this is what I found. That one of the main objectives of the affective domain is to improve moral reasoning and character development. So we want them to have sportsmanship and be outstanding citizens, and physical education is a perfect area to do that in. According to Hedorn and Welch, physical educators have a responsibility to incorporate teaching objectives and learning outcomes that directly reflect the affective domain. In physical education, we do have the opportunity for them to experience different roles, different situations where they do have the opportunity to show their sportsmanship. So that's why I wanted to focus on the affective domain as well. One of the most commonly used models used to teach the affective domain in education is Don Hellison's developmental levels in teaching personal social responsibility. So I found that when teaching the affective domain, most of the teachers used Don Hellison's model, but I hadn't found any research on them using the sport education model and physical education to focus on the affective domain, which is why I wanted to do the research. My methods for my research, of course, the teacher, me, will be the observer, and I'll ensure that everything gets done. All the data and intervention is done correctly. I will have two groups, the experimental group, which will be the group that has the implementation of the sport education model in it. That class will have 44 students, 27 males and 14 females in it. And then the control group that will continue on the traditional approach of teaching physical education, which is, the 1 week of skills that are teacher ran, teacher focused, and then the 1 week of game situations, and then maybe another week of tournament play. We'll have that group as well. It'll be 2 different periods. That control group will have 41 students, 25 males and 15 females. The intervention, the experimental group will participate in a 6-week sport education model of ultimate Frisbee unit. So instead of the 3 weeks that we usually do traditionally in PE, the experimental group will do a 6-week sport education model. The control group will participate in a 6-week traditional ultimate Frisbee unit that focuses on teacher-centered skills and gameplay. So they won't have the seasons or the team affiliation or the formal competition or the culminating events or the record keeping or festivity, which are the 6 key figures of the sport education model. They will just have the traditional physical education experiment. The data that I will be taking for my research, there are 2 types. One will be a Likert skill survey. Students will take a pre and post survey. After they take the pre and post test, this assessment will be analyzed and turned into quantitative data. Also, the second type of data that I will conduct is a personal interview. Students will take a written pre and post personal interview, and this assessment will be used as qualitative data for the study. So whatever the students feel they felt that they missed out on if they weren't in the experimental group, or how they felt about the instruction that they received, how they felt about changing teams each day for the control group, whatever they write down will be included in the study. And here are my references. I appreciate your time, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation in my paper.